You know, he's faced a lot of conservative criticism, but did John Roberts just save the Republican Party from itself? Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, this episode of Right Angle, brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. If you haven't joined yet, you may want to go over there to that website and click the big green Become a Member button. Gentlemen, we did an episode of Bill Whittle Now this week where we tried to make sense of John Roberts' decision to stick with precedent in a case where he actually opposed the outcome in the original case and opposed the outcome in the current case, but decided to be slavishly devoted to the idea of stare decisis, the Supreme Court doctrine of letting the precedent stand. But there's a column in the Washington Post by a Paul Waldman who suggested that Chief Justice Roberts has actually saved the Republican Party from itself by voting with the so-called Democrat appointees on the Supreme Court. And basically, in a nutshell, what he's saying is that by not supporting more restrictions on abortion during a presidential election year, John Roberts has muted the criticism that might otherwise be raised by people who are abortion advocates and has helped to damp down the enthusiasm of an already unenthusiastic electorate about Joe Biden. Stephen Green, I know sometimes these theories are too clever by half, and this one presupposes that John Roberts is not just a pure legal mind and a responsible jurist, but actually is a political animal. What do you think of this idea that Roberts may be essentially letting this pitch go by because he knows the home run ball is on the way and this wouldn't be the right time to swing?
I'll get to that in just a sec. First, I want to say you gave me a great idea, Scott. You mentioned the Democrats aren't exactly enthused about Joe Biden, and I think I've come up with a way to help the party generate more excitement for their alleged presidential nominee, and that is they can do a reboot with him in the starring role of Weekend at Bernie's. I think it'd be a smash hit. They'd have to do a rush production, obviously, to get it out in time for the November election. But I would pay money to see Weekend at Biden's. I really would. Anyway, back to your thing about John Roberts, the political animal, the genius mastermind. He reminds me of a story I heard from an English gentleman friend of mine who was showing me around his flat in Chelsea when my wife and I were in London, 15 years ago now. He was very proud of this. He has a bar in his basement that was paid for by the KGB. Now, the previous owner of this apartment, before his parents owned it, tried to play double agent back in the 60s. And he said, I've got to entertain all these people if I'm going to flip these politicians or bureaucrats or whatever. So I need to be able to entertain. And the KGB, who was notoriously stingy, finally agreed to pony up to put a wet bar in this basement in this London apartment in Chelsea, which is a very nice neighborhood. But the guy never delivered. He was just milking the KGB for everything he could. And they finally cut him off because if you're a double agent, at some point, you got to deliver the goods. You can't just be all pretending to be on the other side and not deliver for the side you're supposed to actually be on. So at what point, if John Roberts is this genius, is he going to deliver for the constitutional conservative cause? This is the guy who's such an evil damn genius that he was able to convince himself that a penalty was a tax in order to save Obamacare from legal extinction. No, he's not. I can't even wrap my head around how badly he's failed to deliver for when was he sworn in? Was it 2003, 2004 as Chief Justice? I think it was the second half of Bush's first term, maybe the first half of Bush's second term. It's been a long time. It's been 15 years, give or take. At what point is John Roberts going to deliver that knockout blow on a big issue? I'm not saying he's wrong on absolutely everything, but when it comes to upsetting anything that is established even in the slightest way for the left that we've been trying to undo forever, he whiffs. He's no evil genius. He's just kind of there.
Now, Bill Whittle, I know it seems like a stretch to assume that anybody on the Supreme Court has political motivations. Pause for laughter. But I think that it just seems particularly unlikely that John Roberts is this kind of a character. Nevertheless, let's just say he had no intention of doing this. Do you think that the effect is what this Paul Waldman in the Washington Post says, which is we've muted the possibility of a great big caterwauling from the Planned Parenthood left at a time when they desperately need to rally some enthusiasm for their presidential candidate?
Yeah, I think the conclusion is actually accurate. In fact, I think the guy who wrote the article he got like half of the picture of how he's correct. By making this ruling, it's true, according to this columnist, I agree with him, it does not give the left the one third rail to rally around that would bring people out who would otherwise not come out for Joe Biden but would do anything to preserve abortion rights. And that's half of the story. But the other half of the story, in terms of going in the same direction, in terms of potentially saving the GOP, is now he's also motivated large numbers of Republicans to get out and vote for Donald Trump so that we can have fewer people rather than like John Roberts on the court who go squishy when we need him to make a stand. So he's not only has Roberts defanged the argument that the left would use, which is what the article said, he's also highly motivated conservatives to go out and vote for Donald Trump, who's already put two conservatives on the bench and is in with re-election could conceivably do 2 or 3 more at least. So yeah, I think he's right about that. The issue is, did he do it on purpose? Is this the mastermind? There's a pretty compelling case to be made out there that Jar Jar Binks is actually a Sith Lord, and that all of the moves that Jar Jar Binks made was designed to bring about the Empire. And you can make that case, and it's a sophist case. It doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. The reason I don't think that John Roberts did this on purpose and is waiting for a better pitch is because of the few statements that he has made. When he made the ruling in favor of Obamacare, he said he was very concerned about what history's view of the Roberts court would be, and that's Judge Ito. That's TV judge looking at ratings kind of thing. He as we discussed on the other episode, not going to go through that again, he seems to have no moral core. He's certainly willing to let procedure overturn justice, as he personally has described it. So I just think that much like James Comey, it's just this ongoing process that starts with disappointment and then turns into disbelief and then becomes actual anger at people who seemed like good guys, seem like the kind of people you want in government or in the Supreme Court. And every day that goes by, you find further and further evidence that they're not these things at all. They're just prideful, morally adrift apparatchiks, and it's been a huge disappointment. And I get the feeling that disappointments ain't done yet.
I think it's really hard for the average person, and by that I mean someone like me sitting on the outside, to be able to evaluate what's really going on inside an institution like the Supreme Court, both because of their intentional kind of veil of secrecy, which has only been lifted slightly in recent years, but also because of the fact that I just don't have the mind of a jurist. I don't have the mind of a legal scholar or a lawyer. I read Neil Gorsuch's book within the last 6 months or so, and one of the things he was talking about was how most cases that the Supreme Court decides are not 5-4 cases. It's not a really tight case. In fact, most of them are pretty overwhelming majorities, a lot of unanimous cases, and they're really only a handful that come down to these narrow sorts of decisions. And to get the idea that somebody like a John Roberts is sitting around and saying, okay, let's see, how can we orchestrate things so that we can pick just the right case to come before us so that I can overturn Roe versus Wade. I'm lying in the bushes here waiting to ambush Roe versus Wade. I think is really engaging in flights of fancy that happen on TV shows and movies, but don't really happen in the real world. The other thing is this presumption that we have that other people are moved by nefarious motives, but we ourselves act with integrity. We presume that other people do their jobs in a way that's just angling for advantage or angling for what their preferred outcome, but that when I go to work, I actually do the right thing and I'm honest and I treat people with fairness and stuff like that. So I tend to err on the side of giving people the benefit of the doubt and taking them at their word until through a consistent pattern of nefarious behavior they prove otherwise. And right now I think John Roberts is he's on the wire. He's on the border between those two. His argument for why he voted the way he did in June Medical Services versus Russo, while not my preferred outcome, actually makes sense. The fact that he said, look, the Supreme Court made this decision in 2016 in the case of Whole Women's Health versus Hellerstedt. And even though I was a dissenter at that point, it was the court's ruling, and stare decisis is important because like cases should be decided in a like manner. All of that makes sense to me. But the possibility that he's sitting around and just saying, it's not really stare decisis, is what I'm saying is this admitting privileges for abortion doctors at local hospitals, that's small potatoes. Let's wait till the big beluga comes swimming by, and then Ahab will take out his spear and go after that thing, or harpoon. I don't think that he thinks that way. I do think he thinks he's doing the right thing, like most of us do in our work. And if the case should arise and he had an opportunity to take down Roe versus Wade, he would do so, but only if he could do so within his view of proper procedure and ethics and tradition of the Supreme Court of the United States. For Stephen Green and Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible.